Marlon Brando was mid-scene under the hot stage wash when he noticed the object on the footlight rail. A plain white card, folded once, resting where only crew should be. Not for him. Not yet. A Union local number was ink-stamped on the outside, pressed hard enough to bruise the paper. Brando kept his face neutral, voice steady, letting the audience think it was part of the set dressing. But he understood what it meant. Someone backstage had been close enough to place a warning in the light. What he chose to do next would either make him untouchable in this theater, or get him quietly shut out of every room that mattered. Rewind, Los Angeles, late 1960s, a charity performance that was really an industry test. The theater was old enough to remember vaudeville, plaster cherubs above the proscenium, velvet seats worn smooth, brass rails dull from 1,000 palms. Outside, valet engines idled in a line, exhaust mixing with night jasmine. It wasn't a show, it was a machine, and the wrong men owned the gears. The studios, the unions, the favors, everything ran through quiet hands that never appeared on playbills. You could feel the control in the details. Programs were printed on thick stock that didn't crease unless someone wanted it to. A seating chart lived in the stage manager's pocket like a holy document. The sponsor table wore smiles like masks, wide, fixed, expensive. Agents sat with notebooks closed, counting reactions. Near the exits, two men stood watching the room rather than the stage. Brando wasn't new to pressure. He'd played men whose presence changed rooms before they spoke, and he'd met the real version in hallways afterward. He knew the difference between applause and permission, between a handshake and a grip that meant, remember who pays. Real power didn't shout. It corrected quietly, and it preferred correction to happen where everyone could see it. Tonight, Brando could feel permission shifting, like a lock turning somewhere behind the curtains. A tempte arrived during an applause break. A messenger in a neat dark suit stopped at the stage steps, one stair below the light, careful not to step into the spotlight. Under the footlights, the folded card looked harmless, almost childish, but the stamped number wasn't decoration, it was a door code. Mr. Brando, the messenger said, polite and flat, a friend asks you to cut the ending. 2 minutes. Brando didn't turn his head. Tell your friend to buy a shorter ticket. The messenger's smile held, but his eyes didn't. He doesn't like jokes. Brando nodded once. Then he shouldn't bring comedy into a theater. The messenger backed away, quick and clean, like he didn't want to be photographed in the wrong place. But that wasn't the worst part. The crowd shifted in small, synchronized ways. A glass stopped halfway to a mouth. A laugh tried to start, then died. A woman in satin pressed her napkin to her lips as if she could keep words from escaping. At the edge of the stage, a cable wrangler paused with tape in his teeth, eyes flicking from Brando to the aisle. Somebody's cufflink caught a beam of light and flashed once, a tiny signal no one admitted seeing. The band kept playing, but the pianist's left hand softened like he was stepping around broken glass. Brando stepped back into the scene as if nothing had happened, yet the room was no longer watching the script. A temp became with weight. A heavier man approached, older, slick hair, ring catching the light once when he moved, confidence that didn't need speed. The older man's ring looked heavy enough to leave a mark on a tabletop. When he shifted, the leather of his chair made a quiet complaint, and behind him 2 seats stayed empty, reserved space, like a threat held in reserve. He didn't whisper. He let the front tables hear the pressure. You'll take an intermission, he said. Now. Brando's voice stayed calm. We're not at that part. The man's jaw tightened. You're making this difficult. Brando looked at him like he was reading a receipt. You brought difficulty with you. A beat, long enough for the stage lights to hum. This is a union house, the man added. Brando nodded. Then act like one. Stop bullying the stage. The silence after that answer was louder than any threat. The heavier man produced the same folded card Brando had seen on the rail. He held it up, not offering it, showing it, like evidence. Read it, he said. Then you'll understand. Brando didn't reach. I understand enough. The man's eyes flicked to the side aisle, a small check-in with someone unseen. Across the room, a server froze with a tray of drinks, then backed away without serving. A camera lifted once, then lowered again, deciding it preferred its owner employed. The band played on, but softer, as if music could negotiate. And then the real message arrived. A stage manager appeared with a clipboard pressed to her chest like armor. Her smile was professional, but her hands shook at the edges. Marlon, she whispered, please, just step off stage for a minute. They're insisting. Brando didn't move. Who's they? Her eyes darted to the right orchestra section. People who don't sit unless they own the chair. Brando's tone stayed even. Then they can stand with everyone else. She swallowed hard, as if swallowing a mistake, and backed away into the wing. In the wings, someone whispered into a handset, then went still. A door near the pit opened and closed without anyone passing through. That was when the rules changed. The countdown started. 7:06 p.m. The house lights warmed half a shade, flattering faces, hiding sweat. 7:07. Two ushers appeared with fresh earpieces, then pretended they'd always been there. 7:08, a block of seats near the center aisle filled with men who hadn't been present at dinner. Their suits matched too well. Their hands stayed empty. No drinks, no programs. They sat like they were waiting for testimony. From the stage, Brando could see that new block like a dark rectangle cut into the audience. People around it leaned away without meaning to, creating a thin mote of space. A waiter approached, stopped, and turned as if redirected by a hand he couldn't name. Brando felt the theater become smaller. Not physically, socially. People stopped turning their heads, stopped making eye contact, stopped being individuals. A producer in the front row held his hands together like prayer could be used as a contract. Up in the balcony, faces were dim shapes, but attention felt physical, like a lens tightening. The band kept time, but quieter now, the drummer brushing like he didn't want to wake anything. He didn't know it yet, but the room had already chosen a side. The fixer made himself visible without standing. Mid-40s, thick neck, careful haircut, face shaved close, eyes calm enough to be dangerous. Seated at the end of the new block, slightly lower in Brando's line of sight, like the room had been arranged for him. His cigarette never lit, but he held it like he could decide whether the room got smoke or fire. When he tapped ash from nothing into a glass dish, it felt like rehearsal for something worse. Several men in the front row stared at the stage and refused to look back, as if turning their heads would make them complicit. The drummer missed a beat. Silence began to leak into the music. Brando reached the line in the scene where the audience usually laugh. Tonight, nobody laughed. The fixer raised two fingers, not a threat, timing, ownership of the moment. The band trailed off mid-bar, instruments hovering in hands. Silence dropped so clean you could hear fabric shift, a chair creak, a single ice cube slide and click. In that stillness, the folded white card on the footlight rail seemed brighter than it should have been. This was the moment it stopped being a rumor. Brando stepped to the edge of the stage, not rushing, not delaying. He leaned toward the house microphone used for announcements, voice level. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "we're going to pause the planned program. No apology, no explanation." He set the script pages down carefully, as if neatness mattered. Then he walked down the stage steps into the aisle. As he left the spotlight, it didn't follow. For a second he was just another man in dim light, surrounded by expensive suits and cheap fear. He crossed the carpet slowly, passing tables of powerful faces trying not to be seen trying. He stopped at the fixer's table, close enough to be heard, far enough to keep it calm. The fixer looked up, eyes steady, posture tense. Brando held the microphone at his side, angled down like a question not yet asked. "If you have something to say," Brando said, "say it where everyone can hear it." A woman nearby tightened her grip on a clutch until the satin wrinkled. A man at the sponsor table lowered his drink without sipping, as if swallowing might be interpreted. The theater held its breath. This wasn't a fight. It was an offer. The fixer's power lived inside doors and quiet phone calls, in favors delivered without witnesses. Now the room was the witness. He stood slowly, smoothing his jacket, feeling the weight of being watched. He took the microphone. "This didn't need to be public," he said, voice low. Brando's face stayed unreadable. "Then it shouldn't have been brought into public." The fixer's eyes tracked the microphone the way a gambler tracks a card. He wasn't afraid of Brando. He was afraid of the room learning it could watch him. The fixer tried to change the frame. When he spoke about tough men, it wasn't an insult, it was a reminder that reputation can be borrowed, but consequences are owned. "You play tough men," he said. "Don't mistake that for protection." Brando let the line hang, refusing to decorate it with emotion. "You confused silence with permission," Brando said. A few people exhaled at once, like a wave. The fixer glanced around and saw the problem: donors, lawyers, union faces, too many important eyes. Threats don't work the same when they have an audience. He lowered the microphone an inch, as if volume could undo a moment. "You've embarrassed someone," he said. Brando nodded once. Important people survive embarrassment. The fixer's jaw tightened. He handed the microphone back. No shouting, no violence, just a retreat disguised as choice. Brando accepted the mic as if it were a coat being returned and turned away. In the aisle behind him, chairs creaked as men adjusted, relief trying to pass as dignity. He walked back to the stage alone. Applause started late, careful, testing whether clapping was safe again. The band resumed, quieter than before, as if music had learned fear. Brando returned to his mark and continued the scene with the same tempo, as if the interruption had been written into the night. On stage again, he hit every mark, refusing to be steered. But they listened differently now, like they'd seen the wiring behind the walls. After the curtain, the backstage corridor smelled of hot cables and cold coffee, painted cinderblock, a buzzing exit sign, stacked chairs rattling when someone brushed past. Stagehands pretended to focus on knots and tape, eyes down, mouths closed. The fixer appeared again, alone this time, voice kept low. He kept his hands visible, palms open, performing harmlessness. His eyes stayed sharp, negotiating with the possibility of record. "You made people nervous," he said. "They came nervous," Brando replied. "That's not how you stay employed. Employment isn't the same as permission." The fixer finally gave the reason, simple and chilling. "A producer's brother runs a local," he said. "Pride, money, a bad story in his head." Brando nodded as if hearing the weather. "He wanted you to apologize. Quietly. Tonight." He could have asked. The fixer's mouth twitched, almost a smile. He did, in the only language he respects. Brando didn't offer a speech. He didn't offer a lesson. He offered only the same composure he'd carried on stage. That composure forced the fixer to choose between escalation and optics. In a room full of optics, escalation was the expensive option. Brando looked past him to the closed stage door, hearing muffled laughter from people pretending the night was normal. "And now?" Brando asked. The fixer held his gaze for a long beat. "Now I know you don't scare easy," he said. Brando answered without heat. "Now you know I don't scare at all. I listen." The fixer's shoulders loosened by a fraction, as if the room's temperature had changed. He wasn't satisfied, but he was done. The fixer offered his hand. Brando took it, one shake, no squeeze, no performance. A warning lived inside the gesture, but it stayed unspoken, trapped in etiquette. "Don't make a habit of this," the fixer said. Brando's reply was quiet. "Don't make a habit of crossing into the spotlight." The fixer nodded once, a small acknowledgement that sounded like a door closing. By morning, rumors would inflate the moment the way Hollywood always did. Some would swear there was a gun. Others would insist there was shouting, fists, a rush of security. None of it happened. What happened was smaller, and that's why it lasted. A threat forced into the light, and a room full of witnesses forced to acknowledge it. Later, people would swear it lasted 10 minutes. In truth, it was shorter, stretched by fear into a whole act. That was the quiet truth about hidden power. It prefers hallways, not stages. It prefers private pressure, not public attention. Brando didn't win with violence or speeches. He won by changing the lighting, dragging a whisper into a microphone's range and letting silence do the rest. The next night, the theater ran like it always had, but the people who'd been there carried a new measurement for control, who could hold a room without raising a hand. When the last spotlight cooled, the stage looked ordinary again. A stagehand later found a folded white card near the footlights and picked it up with 2 careful fingers. No one claimed it. No one asked who it belonged to. And that was the final detail that stayed with the people who were there. The night a fixer confronted a movie myth, and the myth refused to blink.